Hi, everyone. Jennifer Rodgers here for Harry Littman to talk to you about developments in the law. So today there was a pretty big one this morning, a hearing in federal district court in Washington, D.C. in front of Judge Tanya Chutkan, who's overseeing former President Trump's criminal case for election interference. She had a hearing about a gag order requested by prosecutors from the special counsel's office. You may recall having seen in the news lots of statements being made by Trump that attacked the special counsel and his staff and even his family and the judge and all sorts of people, witnesses in the case. So there's been a lot of chatter by him, of course, about what he thinks about the prosecution. And so special counsel's office went to Judge Chutkan to ask her for a gag order. It's a tough thing for her. It's a tough request because she's kind of trying to thread the needle between his rights to speech and particularly political speech, because of course he's a presidential candidate, versus protecting the integrity of the case in front of her, the proceedings, and of course protecting potentially the lives of witnesses and other people that he's attacking, whom his followers may attack in the course of these proceedings. So lots on the line, and the hearing didn't disappoint. There were a bunch of fireworks. It was 2 hours worth of mostly back and forth between the judge and Trump's lawyer, John Lauro. And the judge surprised us all, I think, by ruling from the bench. I mean, we'll see a written order later, but she did rule from the bench, and it was a partial victory for the government. They got most of what they wanted. They got a partial gag order. So let's jump into what it was. So the parties started off, as you might expect, very far apart from one another. The prosecutors wanted an order restricting out-of-court statements by all parties that pose a substantial likelihood of material prejudice to the case, including statements about the identity, testimony, or credibility of prospective witnesses, and statements that are disparaging and inflammatory or intimidating about any party, witness, attorney, court personnel, or potential jurors. So that's what they wanted. And of course, Trump and his team said that there shouldn't be any sort of gag order. She got into this a little bit with Trump's attorney. He said that everything that the former president says is protected by the First Amendment. Everything that he says is political speech, so it's subject to the utmost protection. And at one point, at least if the reporting is correct, of course, we don't have cameras in federal courtrooms, but per the reports, she laughed out loud at his suggestion that there had been nothing said by the former president that would even violate this order that the government wanted. So they started off very far apart. And surprisingly, there's not a ton of law in this area. There are a couple of Supreme Court cases, one of which suggests that a court can prescribe extrajudicial statements by parties and lawyers and witnesses, et cetera, to avoid prejudicing a proceeding. And another case that upheld the constitutionality of a rule prohibiting lawyers' statements. But there's just not a lot about actual wording of gag orders and whether they withstand constitutional scrutiny. And of course, nothing at all about what you do about a presidential candidate who's out there speaking when he's been subject to a criminal case. So, she kicked it off by tough questions to the government about the scope of what they're asking for. She was asking questions about, isn't he already subject to limitations on what he can do because of his conditions of release? For example, he can't commit any crimes, and it is a crime to threaten or intimidate witnesses. So, what more do you want? So there was some back and forth about that. And also, how do you define things like disparaging and intimidating? What would Trump actually be allowed to say and not say? And the government, I thought they did a pretty good job of pushing and saying, listen, we have to protect these proceedings. We have to protect the witnesses. The government did concede that Trump can attack the Biden administration and Biden himself and argue that it's a political prosecution, but they wanted her to stop him from threatening or disparaging DOJ writ large, and of course the special counsel's office and others on down the line. So the judge kind of took it one by one. She said, let's talk about intimidation and disparaging comments about the Biden administration, then DOJ, then the special counsel's office, then, witnesses, then the court. And she really wanted to parse it out. And most of this was done in these tense exchanges between the judge and John Lauro, Trump's attorney. And so they just went through and she would say, well, can he say this? Can he say that? What about if he says this? And of course, as I said, John Lauro seemed to suggest that he could say absolutely anything. And then more than once said, well, hey, listen, Judge, you don't have a problem at all if you just put this case off until after the election, because of course this is all political speech. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. She said something like this trial will not yield to the election cycle. Like that was a non-starter, but he still asked for it more than once, which kind of raised a question that didn't come up at the hearing today. I mean, the notion that he would stop threatening and disparaging and intimidating people involved in the case against him if he weren't running for office. I personally think, I don't know how you all feel, but I think he's going to attack people who are charging him and saying things that he doesn't like them to say about him, no matter whether he's a candidate or not. So I think that that was overstated. But still, the judge's job is to try to craft something that will protect the witnesses, protect the proceedings, protect everyone involved, and yet not run afoul of Constitution so that she gets overturned. So, you know, she's trying to do that dance here. There's a lot of conversation about witnesses. The thorniest one of all has to do with Mike Pence, because he's a witness in this case, but also a competing candidate for president. So it kind of, you know, you have run into the situation of surely you can't tell President Trump not to say bad things about Mike Pence when they're both competing for the nomination. So she kind of carved him out, but said that as to the rest of them, he can't talk about them. He can't disparage them. He can't talk about their testimony. So ultimately, you know, the government got most of what they want. The judge said that she would not put any restrictions on statements about Washington, D.C. and how horrible Washington, D.C. is, about the Biden administration or about DOJ writ large, but that she would prohibit all parties from making or reporting statements targeting the special counsel and his staff, the court staff, families of those people. So, for example, he can't call prosecutors deranged or thugs, vilify them. He can't incite violence against any of those people, any of those public officials, and that she would also bar statements about witnesses or the substance of their expected testimony, because it risks intimidating them and other witnesses who he may not even know who they are at this point. So he can, of course, continue to assert that the prosecution is politically motivated. He just can't launch a smear campaign against them or the case, just like any other criminal defendant wouldn't be allowed to do that. The judge said if anyone violates her order, that she will entertain motions for sanctions, or she could also, as the court, sua sponte, meaning on her own, seek sanctions, but there wasn't any discussion of what those sanctions might be and no further discussion about enforcement other than just that one statement. So the order will come and we'll see more about the exact wording that she uses and if she says any more about sanctions or possible outcomes if anyone comes to the court with a violation. And then we'll wait. We'll wait to see whether Trump appeals this order. That's the first question. And then let's assume that the order stays in place. If he does appeal, it doesn't get overturned, or he chooses not to appeal at this time. What happens next? If he says something that is arguably a violation, will the government come forward with a motion? Will the court do it on her own? We shall wait and see. This is what we will all be watching and waiting for. So that's your update from court today. I'm Jennifer Rodgers in for Harry Lippman, and we will talk to you later.
Hey everyone, Harry here. Hope you're enjoying the content from all the friends of our channel, great experts in their fields all. I want to thank them for stepping up to the plate while I'm away. I'll be back soon, and I'm looking forward to resuming the daily videos. Talk to you later.